The Queen's challenge. The great hall of the Kyloth Empire was filled with silence. The air was thick. No one dared to speak. Even the soldiers standing guard along the walls looked nervous. At the center of the room stood a human. His name was Eli Drake, a soldier from Earth. Strong, but calm. He had fought in many battles. But today he wasn't here to fight. He was here because of a challenge. At the far end of the hall sat Queen Zarkara, ruler of the Kyloth Empire. She was tall, 8 feet of pure muscle and beauty. Her skin shimmered like violet metal, and her golden crown was shaped like dragon horns. Her glowing eyes stared down at Eli. Next to her, alien generals whispered and laughed. One of them said, "Look at him, so small, so weak. Is this the best Earth has?" Another one growled, "They say humans are brave, but that one looks like he's already shaking." But Eli wasn't shaking. He stood still, his hands behind his back, eyes fixed on the Queen. Then Queen Zarkara stood up. Her voice echoed across the room like thunder. "So," she said, "this is the human who claims he is strong enough to breed with me?" The aliens in the room laughed. Loud, cruel laughter filled the hall. But Eli didn't blink. "I never claimed that," Eli said, his voice calm. "You did, when you said no human could survive a night with you." The Queen raised an eyebrow. "You twist words. Be careful, little human. One wrong word here and you die." Eli took a breath. "Then let me say it right. I'm not here to survive. I'm here to show you what a human can make you feel." The laughter stopped. Complete silence. Even the Queen looked surprised. One of the generals shouted, "Kill him now! He insults the Queen!" But Queen Zarkara raised her hand. "No, let him speak." She stepped forward, each step shaking the floor. She stood just inches away from him, towering over him like a mountain. "You think you can survive my power?" she asked. Eli looked into her eyes. "Try me." The Queen smiled. Not kindly, like a predator before a kill. "Very well," she said. "Tonight you will share my chamber. If you live, we will speak again." The court gasped. No outsider has ever touched the Queen. Someone shouted, "This is madness." Another cried. But the Queen ignored them all. She turned and walked away, and Eli followed. The Queen's private chamber was unlike anything Eli had seen. The walls were alive with glowing patterns. The air was heavy with sweet-smelling steam. Strange lights floated in the air like stars. Queen Zarkara turned to face him. She crossed her arms. "You can still run," she said. "This is your last chance." But Eli just took off his jacket and placed it on a nearby chair. "I didn't come all this way to run." She narrowed her eyes. "Then prepare yourself." She stepped closer. The room pulsed with heat. The silence between them was louder than war drums. But Eli didn't back down. "You're not afraid of me," he said. "You're afraid of feeling something real." The Queen froze. Her breath caught in her throat. No one had ever spoken to her like that. No one had ever looked at her like that. Then she smiled, but not with mockery. There was something else there, something dangerous, something curious, she whispered. "We'll see, human." And then the chamber doors closed. Outside the chamber, the nobles waited. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Still, no screams, no cries for help, no sounds at all, just silence. They looked at each other. "What's happening in there?" one asked. Another whispered, "He should be begging by now." But no sound came, only silence. The next morning, the doors opened. Queen Zarkara stepped out, alone. Her expression was unreadable, her shoulders tense, her lips pressed tight. She walked past her generals without saying a word, and when one of them asked, "Is he dead?" she stopped, turned slightly, then said, "He is still alive," and walked away. But the look in her eyes told a different story. Something had changed, and deep inside, she knew it. She had felt something she never expected. Something dangerous. Something human. The chamber night. The door closed behind them with a deep, echoing sound. Inside the Queen's chamber, the air was thick with heat and mystery. Glowing crystals floated above, casting soft lights across the floor. The walls were covered, in silver threads that moved slowly like breathing skin. It was a place meant to impress and to intimidate. Queen Zarkara stood in the center of the room, watching Eli with sharp eyes. Her voice was low, calm, but powerful. "You're not what I expected, human." Eli shrugged. "Most aliens say that, before they lose." That made her laugh, but it wasn't the same cruel laugh from earlier. This time it sounded amused. "You think this is a battle?" she asked. "It always is," he replied. "Either I survive, or I teach you something you didn't know about humans." Zarkara walked around him in a slow circle, studying him. He didn't move, didn't flinch. Even when her shadow covered him like a mountain, he remained still. "You're brave," she said, "or foolish." "I was trained on Mars," Eli replied. Bravery and foolishness looked the same from a distance. She stopped in front of him again. Her gaze dropped to his chest, then back to his eyes. "So, what do you think is going to happen here?" "I think you brought me here to test me," Eli said. "But the real test isn't for me, it's for you." The Queen blinked. "Explain." "You're used to power, control. Every creature bows to you. But I won't. Not because I disrespect you, but because I want you to see me as I am. Not a subject, not a toy, just a man." The words hit harder than any weapon. Zarkara had ruled for 90 years, fought in dozens of wars, crushed rebellions, but no one had ever spoken to her like that. She should have struck him down, but she didn't. Instead, she whispered, "You speak like a king. And you look like a goddess." Eli answered softly, "But even gods can feel lonely." That word, lonely, made her pause. No one saw the Queen as lonely, not even herself. But in that quiet room, with no court, no throne, no army, only a man standing calm and honest before her, she felt something warm, something terrifying. Hours passed. They talked, about battles, about Earth, about the stars. She laughed once, genuinely, and then quickly looked away as if ashamed. Eli didn't try to touch her. He didn't make demands. He just listened. And when he spoke, he looked directly into her eyes, like she was more than her crown, more than her height, more than her power. She sat on the edge of her wide silken bed. For the first time in her life, she took off her royal shoulder armor, not for war, not for tradition, but because she felt safe. "You're not afraid of me," she said again, softer now. Eli leaned against a tall crystal near the bed. "Should I be?" Zarkara smiled. And this time it wasn't dangerous, it was something else. Gentle, curious. "I could crush you," she said. "You could," Eli replied. "But I don't think you will." "Why?" "Because you're tired of crushing things." Silence. Then she reached out and touched his hand. It was the first time she had touched anyone without wearing gloves or armor in decades. Her hand was larger, warmer, but it trembled slightly. So did his. Two different worlds, two different species. But in that moment, there was no distance. Outside the chamber, the guard still waited. One turned to the other and whispered, "Still no sound?" "None. Not a scream, not even a shout. What's happening in there?" "I don't know. But whatever it is, it's not war." Back inside, the night passed slowly, not with violence, not with power games, but with whispers, with silence, and with something Queen Zarkara had never allowed herself to feel. Peace. When the lights in the chamber dimmed completely, She closed her eyes not because she needed rest, but because for the first time, she wanted to dream. The aftermath, the sun on Kyloth never truly rose. It hovered. A cold, pale light spread across the palace halls as the chamber doors slowly opened. 2 royal guards stood outside, stiff and ready, expecting to see a broken, bruised human dragged out by force, or a stretcher carrying his body. But what stepped out shocked them both. Eli Drake. Alive. Calm. His Earth uniform was wrinkled, his hair slightly messy, but there was no blood, no fear. He walked like a man returning from a quiet walk, not a night with a war queen. Behind him, Queen Zarkara stood in the doorway, silent, watching. She didn't speak, didn't stop him. Her eyes followed him all the way down the hall. Something had happened between them, but no one knew what. Later that day, inside the medical tower of the palace, royal doctors reviewed Zarkara's health data. Strange, one alien medic whispered, adjusting his scanning lens. Her body temperature is rising at night. Her hormone level, they've changed. Another doctor frowned. Changed? She's not even in season, and the blood markers are showing a foreign signature. The assistant's eyes widened. Foreign? Like human? The lead doctor went pale. This cannot be. That would mean... He didn't finish the sentence. Instead, he locked the data behind a security wall and called for silence. This doesn't leave this room, not until the Queen speaks of it first. Zarkara didn't eat that evening. She sat alone in her private garden, surrounded by glowing trees and black flowers that moved like they were breathing. She stared at her hands. Big, strong, covered in scars from decades of war. But now, they trembled slightly. Why? Why does his voice still echo in my ears? She closed her eyes and remembered Eli's words. You're tired of crushing things. It wasn't just a line. It had opened something inside her she didn't want to admit, had existed. In the Earth Embassy across the city, Eli stood under a cold shower, his hands against the wall, lost in thought. He wasn't sure what to feel. He had gone into that chamber ready for pain, maybe even death. But what happened instead was something far stranger. The Queen had changed. Not suddenly, not completely, but something inside her had shifted, and he had seen it in her eyes when he left. For a moment she had looked human. The next day, a secret meeting was held in the Kyloth war room. Alien generals, nobles, and royal advisors sat in a circle. The Queen was not present. General Carve smashed his fist against the table. This cannot continue, she let him touch her. Speak to her. Walk out alive. He's just a human, another spat. Yet she treats him like an equal. One of the nobles stood. What if the rumors are true? What if something happened in that chamber? Then we're in danger, Carve growled. We must act before she gets too attached. There was silence. Then someone said the unthinkable. Assassinate the human, quietly, before she announces anything. But the Queen was already listening. From behind the glowing wall she had heard everything. Her face was calm, but her eyes burned like stars. She turned to her royal guard. Bring me Eli Drake, now. That evening, Eli was escorted into the throne room. He saw the tension in the guards' eyes. They weren't just standing watch, they were preparing for war. Zarkara stood alone, no crown, no armor, just a flowing silver robe, unlike anything he'd seen her wear before. You called for me? Eli asked. She stepped closer. They want you dead. He didn't look surprised. I expected that. They think I've gone soft, that you've poisoned my mind. And have I? Zarkara stopped in front of him. She looked into his eyes. I don't know what you've done to me, human, she said quietly, but ever since that night, I've felt different. And now, she hesitated. For the first time, Queen Zarkara, the warrior of 1,000, Victories looked uncertain. She placed his hand gently over her belly. I feel something growing inside me. Eli's eyes widened. A long silence followed. Then she whispered the words that would shake the empire. I think I'm pregnant. The unbelievable news. The palace went silent. Not the peaceful kind of silence. This one was heavy, dangerous. It crawled under the skin of every servant, every guard, every advisor. The queen was pregnant, and the father was a human. Queen Zarkara sat on the edge of her throne, one hand pressed gently over her stomach. Her face was unreadable, but inside her mind was spinning. She hadn't even spoken to the child growing inside her, yet something about its presence felt powerful. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't a curse. It was change. And change was dangerous. In the Kyloth Empire, in the palace medical wing, 3 alien doctors stared at the scan floating above the table. The image showed a small life form forming inside the queen. But it wasn't fully Kyloth, and it wasn't fully human. It was both. We should report this, the younger medic whispered. The elder shook his head. To who? The generals? They'll kill the child, but it's royal blood. No, the elder said, his voice trembling. It's something new, something they will never accept. He turned off the scan. Pray the queen tells them first. That evening, Queen Zarkara summoned her council. The high-ranking generals stood on her left, the nobles on her right. Most of them still believed she would punish the human for whatever game had taken place in her chamber. They didn't expect what came next. She rose, tall, calm, eyes glowing like wildfire. I carry a child, she said. Gasps exploded across the room. One noble stumbled backward. What? That's impossible. Who is the sire? General Karv asked, already knowing the answer. Zarkara turned her head slowly and pointed at the human standing silently behind her throne. Eli Drake. The room erupted into chaos. Outrage. This is a disgrace. It's a weapon. A trick by the Earthlings. She's been bewitched. Zarkara raised her hand and the room froze. I made the choice. No one forced me. No one controlled me. I accepted this union willingly. A voice from the back shouted, Then you betray your blood. Another screamed, He must be executed. The child must not be born. Eli finally stepped forward, calm, still, but with fire in his eyes. I didn't come here to take over your empire, he said. I didn't come here to plant flags or steal crowns. I came here because your queen looked me in the eye and didn't see a beast. He turned and looked at Zarkara. She saw a man. Zarkara nodded slowly. And I see him still. The nobles were furious. One of them spat at the floor. You would throw away centuries of pure blood for this. Zarkara didn't blink. I would throw away 10 centuries for truth. Hours later, in the shadows of the palace, assassins gathered, elite warriors, loyal not to the queen but to the empire's old ways. She's lost her mind, one hissed. That human has poisoned her. Then we cleanse the palace, another replied coldly. We kill the human. We kill the child. And if needed, they all went quiet. Then one said it, we kill the queen. Meanwhile, back in her private chamber, Zarkara stood in front of a mirror. She was alone except for Eli. I was raised to believe weakness would destroy us, she said. And now? Eli asked softly. She turned to face him. I don't feel weak, she said. I feel alive. Eli stepped closer. Then let's protect that life. Together. A moment passed. Then she took his hand and placed it back over her belly. The child will be hunted. We'll be hunted. I've been hunted before, Eli whispered. But this time I'll have you beside me. She looked at him, her voice strong. Then let them come. Human versus the Empire. The sky over the Kyloth capital turned dark, though no night had come. Clouds gathered, not from nature, but from warships. They hovered like silent vultures, waiting, watching. Inside the palace, Queen Zarkara stood beside Eli Drake in her private war chamber. The large table in front of them displayed a glowing map of the Empire. Red markers were blinking all over it. Each one was a warning. Each one meant rebellion. 10 fleets have pulled away from royal command, her advisor said, voice shaking. Your own generals. They refuse your orders. They're afraid, Zarkara said coldly. They're not afraid of you anymore, the advisor whispered. They're afraid of him. His eyes flicked toward Eli. The human didn't respond. He simply stared at the map, quiet, but sharp. They're preparing to strike, Zarkara continued. Not just at me, but at my child. Her eyes narrowed. And I will not let them touch either. That night the assassins came. 7 elite killers from the Shadow Order, silent, brutal, trained since birth to eliminate threats to the Empire. They didn't knock. They appeared inside her chambers like ghosts. Eli heard the sound first. A soft shift of air. A metal whisper. He moved fast, rolling just as a blade sliced through the space where his neck had been. Zarkara's roar followed instantly. It wasn't just anger, it was rage. The walls of the chamber shook as her fist slammed into the first assassin, breaking bone with one hit. Eli grabbed a broken spear from the wall. He didn't hesitate. The second attacker lunged and found. Steel in his chest, but it wasn't easy. 2 against 7. Blood. Fire. Broken glass. Zarkara bled from her shoulder. Eli took a blade across his ribs, but they stood together, back to back. One alien screamed, "You've corrupted her, human." Eli replied through gritted teeth. Then why is she fighting harder than you? When the last assassin fell, the room was ruined, and the queen was shaking, not from pain, but fury. She touched her belly. The child was safe. Then she looked at Eli. Blood on his face. A torn uniform, but still standing, still ready. He smiled through the pain. Well, that was romantic. She chuckled despite herself. You're insane. No, he said. Just committed. The next morning, a royal broadcast echoed through the Empire. Queen Zarkara appeared on every screen, bloody but unbroken. She spoke with fire. There are those who believe I've gone weak, that a single human has broken me. Let me correct them. He didn't break me. He made me stronger. She stepped aside and let Eli walk into view. The entire galaxy watched as a human stood beside their queen, alive and proud. Zarkara continued, You tried to kill him. You tried to kill our unborn child. You failed. And from this moment on, if you raise a hand against him, you raise a hand against your queen. The message was clear. This was war. Back in the war room, Eli stared at the map again. More red signals had appeared. But this time something else showed up too. Small blue lights blinking at the edges. Loyal ships. Some Kyloth commanders were choosing. The queen sighed. I didn't think any of them would stay, Zarkara said quietly. They're not staying because of me, Eli said. They're staying because of what you just became. And what's that? He looked at her. You're not just a queen now. You're a mother. The child of 2 worlds, lightning cracked across the skies of Kyloth. But it wasn't a storm. It was war. Ships moved like shadows overhead. Rebellions lit the edges of the Empire. Cities once loyal now stood uncertain. The entire galaxy was watching, and deep inside the royal palace, the queen screamed. Zarkara gripped the edge of the birth table, her skin shining with sweat, her sharp teeth clenched. The room was sealed. Only trusted medics were allowed inside. And Eli. He held her hand. Even as her grip nearly crushed his. Bones, he didn't flinch. I'm here, he whispered. I'm not going anywhere. I'm going to kill you for this, she growled between contractions. You already tried, he joked. She laughed, and then screamed again. The child was coming early. Far too early. No one knew if it would survive. Human biology. Alien strength. A genetic gamble never before seen. It's not just a child, one medic whispered. It's history. Outside generals debated. She's weak. Labor makes her vulnerable. This is our only chance. Attack now, strike the palace, end this madness. But something stopped them. It wasn't fear. It was uncertainty. Because no one knew what that child would be. A freak, a monster, or a miracle. Inside, time slowed. And then, the cries filled the room. Loud, clear, powerful. The medics froze. Queen Zarkara sat up, panting, blood on her hands. Eli stood still, staring, and in the doctor's trembling arms it was the child, small yet strong. Soft pink skin but glowing violet eyes, tiny fingers, with sharp nails. A heartbeat that pulsed like thunder, and a sound in its voice that silenced the room. It was not fully human, not fully alien. It was something new. Zarkara reached for the child. Her arms shook. When she held it against her chest, her voice broke for the first time in years. "I've led armies," she whispered. "I've taken planets, but I've never felt this before." Eli leaned closer. "Love? No," she said softly. "Hope." The door slammed open. A bloodied guard stumbled in. "They're coming," he gasped. 10 squadrons. They know. The child has been born. They want it, or they want it dead. Zarkara stood up. Still bleeding, still exhausted, but she didn't hesitate. "Hide him," she ordered, handing the child to Eli. "Take the secret path, the garden tunnel. I'll hold them off." Eli didn't move. "Not without you." Zarkara locked eyes with him. "You are his father," she said firmly. "He needs at least one of us alive." Outside, war horns echoed through the palace grounds. Elite rebel troops marched toward the gate. Inside, Eli ran through the hidden passage, holding the child close. The small heartbeat against his chest gave him strength. He didn't look back, but in his mind her voice echoed, "I'll hold them off." In the throne room, Queen Zarkara stood alone, armor cracked, wounds open, but eyes full of fire. They burst through the doors, and she smiled. "You came for my son," she said. She cracked her knuckles. "Then come take him." A new dynasty begins. Smoke rose above the royal city. The battle had begun. Explosions lit up the sky as rebel ships dropped pods filled with shock troops onto the palace grounds. The old empire's loyalists screamed their war cry. Purity above. All. But they were too late. In the underground tunnel below the palace, Eli Drake ran through the shadows, carrying his newborn son in his arms. The child didn't cry. He looked up at his father with wide, glowing eyes. He was silent, calm, alert. Almost like he understood. Eli looked down at the child. "We're gonna make it," he whispered. "Your mother's buying us time." Above, Queen Zarkara stood tall in the throne room, surrounded. Blood trickled down her leg. Her armor was cracked, her energy was low, but her heart, stronger than ever. A rebel general stepped forward. "You lost," he said coldly. "Step down. Give up the child." Zarkara smiled faintly. "No. This is your last warning." She didn't move. Instead, she raised her voice, not in a scream but in a command. "You will not touch my son." And then she charged. The room shook. Guards flew through the air. She was a blur of motion, an ancient warrior queen who fought not for conquest, but for her family. Far below, Eli reached the hidden escape gate, but it was blocked. More rebel soldiers waited outside. "Give us the child," they shouted. "He is a mistake." Eli set the baby down gently in a pod cradle. He turned to face them, unarmed, just a man, but not an ordinary one. The soldiers rushed him. He didn't run. He fought like a storm. He wasn't trying to win. He was buying time. Back in the palace, Zarkara fell to her knees. She had taken down a dozen, maybe more, but she was bleeding too much. Her vision blurred. She smiled bitterly. "So this is how I end," she thought. Then, the sound of boots. She looked up, expecting enemies, but instead, loyalist guards, dozens, then hundreds, and behind them alien captains from outer systems. One of them knelt before her. "My queen," he said, "we received your signal. We came." For you. For the child. Zarkara closed her eyes, not from pain, but from relief. At the gate, just as Eli was about to fall, a blast of blue light shot from the sky. Reinforcements, royal fighters from House Elvoria, Queen's allies. They pushed back the rebels. Eli collapsed beside the pod, barely conscious. One of the soldiers checked on the child. He's alive. And strong. Another looked at Eli. And the father? He fought for his blood. 1 week later, the war was over. The rebels had fallen. Some surrendered. Others fled to the dark corners of space. But the Empire? It didn't return to the old ways. It changed, because a new ruler had been born. Inside the palace garden under a glowing moon, Queen Zarkara sat beside Eli. Their child, wrapped in silver cloth, slept in Zarkara's arms. "He's the first," she whispered. Eli smiled, but not the last. "What should we call him?" Eli looked up at the stars, then said softly, "Let him have a name that belongs to no world but to both." She nodded. Then she stood up, tall, proud, and unbroken. She turned to the crowd of soldiers, citizens, aliens from all across the galaxy who now gathered in silence. Holding her child in her arms, she declared, "This is our son, the first of the new dynasty, a union of Earth and Kyloth, born from war, but made for peace." And the people cheered, not just for their queen, not just for the human, but for the child of two worlds.